If you're SK Gaming, I agree with you. Leave the Arthur open. Well, why wouldn't you after that? It wasn't just the early first blood and that kind of stuff. Belair just didn't seem to have any, Ducky didn't seem to have any impact at all on that pick.
Even the bats out of hell from Belair as well, I think were just such a problem for Lasbra, for Wowy. And once those, I can't even necessarily classify them as team fights because it didn't feel like team fights. It kind of just felt like SK showed up and then killed anybody in front of them.
Yeah, I think team fight implies that there was an open-ended winner to the engagement. It was really just SK picking engagements that they felt like winning at that exact point and making it work. I think Paul Zhang also was really, really strong. When you can get Zhang off to a lead like that, he can make it look really, really easy, and Paul certainly did that in Game 1. Same bans as Game 1 this time around, and Trifecta selected King Arthur here last time. There's no way they leave it open and let Belair take it after how dominant he looked in that last game, do they?
I definitely would not want to see the King Arthur go into the hands of Belair. So in a sense, I feel like Trifecta are almost forced into picking this King Arthur. And that's exactly going to be the game plan for them. So SK now having the opportunity to respond with the same picks that they did last time around, which was the Xbalanque and the Bacchus, both of which I think played incredibly well for SK because that Darkest Night only helped to further snowball the lead that they established super early on.
Yeah, I think Xbalanque is absolutely an insta-lock here for SK. The Bacchus is one that you could go back to. You could decide to move away from it. I don't think that it was a massive factor in the win. I think that just because of how much work Paul and Belair and Sam were putting in, the duo lane from SK didn't have quite as much on their shoulders in Game 1.
I think there's also a chance. Maybe we even see Weekend going for the Camazotz here in the second and third because SK didn't lock in that Camazotz until way later in their draft. It was their 4th pick selection, which means that if Trifecta wanted to, since the Camazotz clearly posed a lot of problems for Ducky, they could just try to toss it into the jungle for Weekend.
What's the chances he's played it recently, though? I mean, Camazotz has been out of the meta for a long time. It's kind of been a quick, fast resurgence into the solo lane. I will say that of the Camazotz players in solo, Ducky definitely comes to mind as one that played a decent amount of Camazotz when he was in favor in that lane, but he's already locked in the King Arthur. I think it's a good idea to take Camazotz away, but I don't know that that's exactly what they're going to do, and they will not. It's going to be the Ratatosker. You were asking for more early pressure, Taco. This provides it.
I think that Trifecta also probably wanted to get Weekend a pick that he can work with a little bit more freely early on. This heavy mobility from the Ratatosker is definitely going to put a bit of a damper, I think, on SK's aggression.
I love this Camazotz selection right before the second ban phase. You know that was going to be the ban for Trifecta, so SK don't give them the option. Achilles as well. That's going to be Achilles support, I'd imagine, for Eonic. A pretty physical heavy composition, and that's exactly where SK is going, is directly for a Chronos ban. I think that's super heads up. You want to force Trifecta into the 4 physical if you can help it.
And Trifecta are certainly doing everything in their power to try and avoid it. Soul's still on the table here. If SK want to look to ban away, I think the only magical ADC really left for either Wowy or Lasbra to even take, but I'd imagine that Trifecta are probably looking to get Lasbra on a mage that he can actually have some better pressure with the laning phase, because I think the Soul, one thing that she definitely struggles with early on is just those first few levels. You can get that heat passive going and that feels pretty good, but then you feel really open-ended to ganks.
So the Opwash actually the ban for SK. Lasbra has the option to go back to the Hera if he so chooses, and as I mentioned, I think that he had some pretty decent moments on it in Game 1 and limited opportunities, quite frankly, but now Trifecta has another ban. They banned Raijin this slot in Game 1. They've had the exact same first 3 bans. I wonder if this is going to be the Zhang Kui in order to take that away from what Paul did to them in Game 1.
Trifecta are spending a lot of time, too, deliberating over it, but it is going to wind up being that Zhang Kui, so maybe with the Zhang Kui being taken out here, Lasbra might have an easier time looking for punishing 1v1 kills on that Hera.
Has the opportunity if that's the direction he wants to go. Also, again, knock-up immune during the ultimate channel. So that means Ratatosker loses a little bit of value. King Arthur has a knock-up that wouldn't do a whole lot for him. And Zhang Kui is tanky enough that King Arthur's whittle-down strategy doesn't always work quite as easily against him. So I'm totally okay with the Zhang Kui ban. But now SK has an option. In this slot last time, they picked the Camazotz for themselves, but that's already locked in, so it's going to be something a little bit different. And it will be the Vulcan for Paul, making sure that Lasbra on the other side doesn't get his hands on it first.
This might be even worse than to deal with in the Jean Kui. I think Vulcan has so much more self-peel available in his kit. The meatball as well. Lots of interrupt. In case one knockup wasn't good enough from the Bacchus belly flops, now you have to worry about this meatball that's going to be dealing 700 damage or so. And I think the response here, though, from Lasbra with the Agni, this is a pick that I've been wanting to see for a while now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that Lasbra is taking it here today, because I think that that is the level of survivability that Lasbra needs for himself if Trifecta want to find success.
I agree. I like this Agni pick quite a bit, but I love the Robin in response by Sam for Soccer. This is the pick that can chase Agni very, very well, has a really easy time getting out of those bomb stuns and dash stuns because of that overhead kick. I think SK's draft looks better than it did in Game 1.
I agree with that, but I also think that Trifecta's looks better than it did in Game 1, so maybe a little bit more pushback from this Trifecta roster.
Trifecta looking to have a better performance than they did in Game number 1 of the set here in Game 2, but it's the same casters bringing you Game 2. It's Finch, and it's Tolly.
Thanks, Aggro. Thanks, Taco. As we're just about ready to move into game number 2, there's a couple questions on my head, though, right? King Arthur, is Ducky going to have a better time in this solo lane matchup? What about this Vulcan as opposed to the Jean Kui? How's that going to go?
It's all going to come down to the presence, again, from Sanford Soccer that was able to dictate the pacing for SK. The reason why Ducky fell behind on Arthur was because of that gank at that blue buff, and ever since then, it was a tier 3 boots rush versus a tier 2 boots rush out of Ducky. He didn't have enough to back for the Gladiator shield, so he wanted to at least come with something into that lane.
Trying to keep things at least somewhat even in that matchup. Meanwhile, we had Shibalanka and Bacchus. They had an easy time last game, too. Is it going to be the same thing for Zapman and Neil this time? Remember, they basically left Zapman on an island against Wowy, and because he was able to get those free assists, he's able to start building up a small lead over Wowy and be more relevant. We'll see if that's the same call again.
And I think this time around, Trifecta are done being passive this game. Eonic going from a passive Sylvanas early to a very hyper-aggressive Achilles might be the catalyst for Trifecta to build an early lead.
Certainly could be. Eonic had some good plays. He was using his abilities at the right timings to try and cancel out some of the CC. The problem was oftentimes he was just too far forward, or he was a tree with no escape, he just got dove.
That's kind of what trees do. They don't really move, right? So they're just like...
It's one of the things trees do.
They just kind of get chopped down.
Fortunately, Timber was being called, and that was it for Eonic, at least in Game 1. But Game 2, a different story, as Neil is here to threaten them by himself. Speed buff, safe for SK Gaming, and Neil shouldn't be able to get there on the Chaos side, so Lasbra and we can secure that. One-time jungler, now a mid laner. Lasbra going to get his wave.
I like what Neil is doing and how Weekend is adapting to what Neil is doing. They recognize that Neil is just going to harass Weekend, that's going to attempt to do his back camps into the blue. So you know what? He's like, I'm done with this shenanigans. I'm going to the red buff. Have fun trying to harass me if I'm not even there.
Well, that does mean, though, that they won't be able to defend this blue buff for Ducky, so life stays difficult for the solo laner who had a hard time in Game 1. Sprint forced out early on, and Neil holds on to the Horrific because he's not even there. They're able to get that pressure just with Sam's help.
Ducky didn't even know that his blue buff was already completed as he randomly uses his one through the wall, but despite stealing the blue buff, losing the purple buff in response,
That was a blink in.
Better advantage, I'd say, for SK Gaming, because Ducky, without blue buff, can't do anything in the laning phase. Arthur needs that MP5, so you either need blue buff or you need complete control of this Totem of Ku's MP5, and right now, he's not going to have either available.
Which means there's few options available for Ducky. Less options available for Zapman as well, as we saw the blink over the wall from Weekend that forced out the beads from the Shibalanke, so that safety factor will be on cooldown for a while. Probably won't be Wowy that punishes it by himself, but if Weekend returns, maybe a slightly easier Shibalanke to kill than normal.
It is possible. There is a bit of a window between 80 seconds on the blink and 120 on his beads from Zapman, so a 40-second window to do something with. This time, Sam for Soccer making his rotation on the right side of the map. Last time, in the last game, at this window, was on the left side.
Overhead kick. Looks like it's not available for him. Lasbra locks him down, and that means the Agni able to find first blood. Trifecta on the board, looking much better this time. And now Ducky can stand toe-to-toe with Belair without having to worry about all this extra pressure from Sam.
This is so obvious that what Trifecta are doing. Wherever Sam is going, they're going to follow suit. To have a 3-player rotation with Ducky already being in the solo lane anyway, at the 2-minute mark, they're giving up a lot of farm on the opposite side. Neirumah was able to strip away those back camps on the left side, but if Trifecta can find another kill in the soul lane, it would be worth it.
Oh, Belair able to stand tall inside that spinning Beyblade from Ducky, even with Eonic there.
That's 3 waves of archers. Belair is just going to skyrocket in the experience, but now this gives a window for Ducky to get back into the laning phase as long as he can get his blue.
Root lands onto Eonic. The stun is there as well.
Oh,
no,
no,
it doesn't come through, so Eonic almost had the chance, but over the top came Neil with the flop, and that makes it 1-for-1 in the kill department. SK Gaming even things up.
Wanting revenge, SK Gaming go right back to where Sam died, but this time he brought some company in the form of a Bacchus, just bringing the life of the party, if you will.
He does carry the life of the party with him, it feels like, doesn't he, inside that jug, but level 5 Paul was there with Weekend, who's only level 3. I don't know if he recognizes he has company, but Weekend can't do much. In fact, Weekend's going to fall. Root lands. They didn't even need the ultimate. Sam cleans it up.
Zoning gold
No
coming
options,
out of
yeah.
Paul. Sanford Soccer needed to find the kill instead. You know, getting some confidence under your jungler, not a bad idea. You know, like, hey, Sam, I'm going to miss my ulti so you can get this kill.
That's right. He was just kind of alley-ooping it to him as Lasbra almost falls. Aegis was there anyway, but a nice stun from Eonic to be at least some peel to shut down the Belch.
Yeah, if that stun didn't happen right there, I think maybe 1 or 2 ticks would have still gotten through, and even the Aegis wouldn't have been in time to save the life. But still, forcing out Lasbra to back to base, he's going to be hurting for experience.
But right now, Trifecta are looking much better than we saw from them in Game 1, it feels. Ducky is very relevant still in his matchup with Belair, and you can feel good about where Lasbra is relative to Paul right now, too. So far, they're doing much better.
But the disparity are these mid laners. A total of 100 experience per minute is starting to favor Paul. He's able to be level 6, while Lasbra is just now level 5. This is going to be scary because Neirumah is looking to engage clearly. Without an Aegis defensive relic for Lasbra, he could be the primary target for SK Gaming.
He does have Eonic lurking in the wings, though, to back him up. Just throws out a little bit of damage that shuts down what Neil's looking for, so they'll look for no more aggression, at least for now. But this is perfect timing. Red buff is just about to respawn. Wowy wants to be there for it as well, but so does SK Gaming.
That's the idea. SK Gaming are controlling the minions outside the tier 1 mid tower so that they can be in prime position to invade this red. The problem is Zapman's not here, so with Wowy being the presence, it should go in Trifecta's favor.
And it looks like SK didn't have the exact timer on it. Paul threw the magma bomb over the wall a little early, so once they realized they didn't have the chance to contest, they just gave up on it. They'll set it for these back harpies, which Belair made a point to continuously come try and strip away last game.
They did, and now it's Sanford Soccer continuing that trend in game number 2. He did get spotted because of that ward, and Ducky doing a good bait.
And that means the bombs can come through from Lasbra. Sam's able to immune a good bit of the damage to the overhead kick, but can he get away from Weekend, who's up in the air? Blink baits it out, but Weekend with a blink of his own comes in to clean up the kill. That makes it 2 for 2 total, but Neil, things could be even worse. Another ultimate coming out from King Arthur means they can lock him down.
Look at Paul's ultimate, not actually able to connect this time. Needing to clean up is Belair, at least finding Eonic, making it a 1-for-1, but still trading out your support. That's a level 4 Achilles for a level 6 Robin, still favoring out Trifecta, and I love what Ducky did to start off that engage. It was so obvious for Trifecta that they knew Sanford Soccer's positioning. They had a ward on their own backhand, so Ducky baits himself on purpose by starting the blue and then does a quick 180 Excalibur Wrath, picking up Sanford Soccer, allowing the rest of his teammates to clean up.
And this time, Tully, the build path for Ducky feels much smoother. He's able to go right into the Glad Shield like normal without having to stop in between with those boots. And without the pressure from Sam, with the build path being normal, he's able to hold quite evenly with Belair.
That's kind of what happens when you don't get ganked at your blue buff right off the bat to die at like level 3, I think it was, or level 4 even in the first game. He had to back with less than that 1,050 gold.
Up into the sky, Ducky pulls him, and he's going to try and lock him down as well. Belair knows he can trade and find some sustain, but Ducky's the one that's full HP. Not much kill potential, but he can push Belair back. King Arthur's not as easy as Game 1 made it look for Belair to defeat, so this time I expect Ducky to be much more relevant.
There's still a window where Ducky can control this matchup as Belair trying to look for any sort of trades that he can. Without multiple minions to jump on with Devour, you're not going to be able to really out-sustain Ducky that is going to be able to hit those minions.
Neil still just roaming the map, looking for what farm he can disrupt. But this time, the rotation from Trifecta was much better, so Neirumah couldn't come in and steal it away for free. This is great adjustment between Game 1 and Game 2 for Trifecta. There will be further tests for them down the line, but at least this time on the pop quiz at the beginning of the day, I think they've shown up with the answers.
It has been a switch of the styles, I would say, because now you have the global pressure. You know, you had a mobile Pele for a week in last game. Wasn't really enough, so what do? You get the global Ratatasker. You had a passive Sylvanas for Eonic, change that around, put an aggressive Achilles there, and things are starting to look a little brighter for Trifecta that has 2 kills at 8 minutes in, and they haven't given up too much thus far. I believe in the first game at 11 minutes, they were down like 6,000 gold.
Right.
But so far, this is a better pace.
I'm surprised that Weekend hasn't been able to find more pressure onto Paul on this Book of Thoth rush as Belair is low. Yeah, Sanford Soccer here for support, but Weekend's here as well, and that sets up Ducky to find the clean kill. They might even want more. Weekend goes up into the sky, very telegraphed, but there's not much Sam can do. The knockup lands. Ducky finds the double. Much better so far in the second showing.
And I love how Eonic was trailing Neirumah the whole entire time, allowing Ducky the intel that he needed to come back into the safety outside that Tier 1 tower. And with these 2 picks, Trifecta should be able to start controlling the pacing of this game relatively well. The problem is they did it on the right side of the map, and it wasn't around the Gold Fury, so it's still too early of a game for them to abuse these respawn timers.
Well, hold your horses, everybody out there. The 58% that voted for Trifecta last time might feel a little bit better now about how they've been performing. This game, certainly not over, not in anyone's favor just yet, but that already feels a bit like a win for a team that had so few options in Game 1, that had so few go right. Now they can say, hey, we've been able to slow things down and keep ourselves relevant.
And the way Weekend made that call to tower dive under the Tier 1, you could tell the confidence that that was a guaranteed kill. No possible escape from Sanford Soccer. Belair even going to use that bat out of hell. Going to get some damage off to proc that Gladiator shield a little bit as he gets under the safety. But yeah, without the overhead kick, without the Mystic Rush from Sanford Soccer, Weekend uses through the Cosmos, allows Ducky to dive with him.
Wowy might have been baited as he goes into the airstrike to try and get away, and Neil can't find the flop. And Wowy makes it to Eonic, who comes in from stage right to try and help out, sends him on his way. He does keep stepping forward, but he's able to shrug off those extra bolas from Zapman. He's not in too much trouble, despite only being level 6. That seems especially low.
Yeah, that does seem relatively low, but Neirumah not too much higher than him, right? Level 7 with only about a 30 to 40 experience per minute difference between these two. Now going to be able to get some minions under his own Tier 1 tower, trying to hold those minions for Wowy coming back with that Xingwei passive.
Weekend, though, looking to punish. The Camazot stun comes through, and they shut him down. You're not getting a free solo lane this time. Trifecta flipping the script on Belair.
So this is the way this matchup works. It's not even a 1v1. It's just whichever jungler makes their presence felt first. Last game it was Sanford Soccer. This game, Weekend a little bit more consistent in that solo lane.
And that's why you see things going in favor of Trifecta. But can they keep that same momentum going elsewhere on the map? Will the fact that Weekend has shown so much attention and right hurt them elsewhere? So far, Zapman has been freely able to farm. Paul went Book of Thoth with no boots for about 10 minutes in the game. Now they're finally finished, and he was never under even a little bit of pressure. Will they perhaps pay for this extra focus they've put onto this Camazot?
This is definitely going to need to be the Paul and Zapman show because their frontliners are struggling a little bit. Ducky now very low between the Tier 1, Tier 2 tower. Weekend trying to do what he can to at least peel off this pesky Camazots, even though that's not even their side of the map.
Yeah, really not much they can do. Instead, they'll focus their attention on the red buff. Lasbra's here, so is Eonic. So they've got plenty of numbers, but they can't actually move into the pit. That's another easy red buff steal for SK. I believe 2 in a row. When you start chaining those together, it's not hard to build a lead for your mid laner.
It's a small win, honestly, because, yeah, that disparity that Ducky has gotten for himself over Belair is starting to show its weaknesses, where Lasbra is struggling, just now hitting level 11, whereas Paul has been level 12 for a while. He had time to back to base and pick up the second relic.
Ultimate comes out from Zapman. That enables him for the 1v2, but it's only a 1v2 for a second as Eonic has his ultimate forced out. Neil now shows up. Wowy has to use beads and is able to jump right out of there. And so Trifecta make it out, but it cost them the beads of their hunter, though it looks like Zapman had to use his too.
I wouldn't be surprised if SK called for a Gold Fury. Knowing the Fatal Strike is down, knowing beads from Wowy is down, there's an advantage for Paul in the mid lane, and with that Vulcan ultimate, that's an easy confirmed objective.
And then they will go back to pull it, and I don't think Trifecta's going to be able to make it in. Agni Bombs are good to contest from range, but only if you can control the space, and that's another win for SK Gaming. Gold Fury goes down, but they're going to try and answer with the Pyromancer, and this is good. Not as good as a Gold Fury, but it's about the best response they can hope for.
It's a little bit of gold back, so they're not going to be bleeding too much. They'll mitigate some of it, but still heavily favoring SK Gaming, controlling the left side of the map there. The Pyromancer gets some extra mobility when you're leaving the fountain, but it actually does favor Trifecta if they do have to keep backing the way SK Gaming have been this aggressive, to be fair.
Yeah, that's right. They'll have a little bit extra movement speed to maybe help them get back to lane a little bit faster. So, hey, maybe it's not too bad for the Trifecta squad, as they're truly only down about 1,000 gold, and 13 minutes into the game, that's not much, especially with experience this even.
That's right.
The difference is that Trifecta is going to have a King Arthur in this late game, right? And that's going to be quite scary for SK.
But the problem is right now, Ducky doesn't have that magical defense, right? So I think it's up to Paul to really start bringing in the pain. And don't forget, Neirumah on the Bacchus, even at level 10 with guardian items, will do a lot of damage. So if Ducky goes too far forward, look for that magical damage on him.
That's a good point. Another disparity is that Eonic is quite far behind, still level 8. Last time we talked to him about 3 minutes ago, he was level 6. So he hasn't been able to do a ton for himself since then. Because he's ignored this duo lane so much to give Wowy room to farm, I don't think he's been able to find the same farming opportunities that Neil has at 1-0-1 and without having taken any deaths.
Well, the problem is he was rotating so much because the beginning of the game, he did start in the dual lane. They were looking for the purple buff invade in the 2v1. They got it to counteract losing their blue buff, but the problem was the fact that Eonic started rotating towards the soul lane, which enabled a kill onto Sanford Soccer at one point, and that's where the sacrifice as the support starts showing.
Ducky does have Belair up in the air, and that's quite a bit of damage. And this tier 1 tower is not long for this world, so they can continue this dive, at the very least force out the bad of the hell, but the response from SK appears to be to put some pressure in duo lane. They've got Paul rotating over as well, and I don't know if Wowy recognizes. Bede should be up shortly, so he should only lose this buff. He should be safe.
Overhead kick to prevent the Agni bomb damage from rolling through this level 12 Robin without much defense or help. Left side, though, Wowy not going to be in trouble with that airstrike still available to him, but that tier 1 tower certainly will. Or not.
They're not going to keep pushing. Wowy's able to come back in time. They even have the rotation from Weekend coming over, as well as from Agni, from Lasbra. So they'll be able to slow this down some. But remember, this Fury's already been taken. There's not really a punish there for Trifecta. They can at very least take the purple buff down.
Great map awareness from everybody at SK Gaming, not going for that tier 1 tower, but this time Trifecta wanted to force the issue a little aggressively between the tier 1 tier 2, and I think SK Gaming have something to say about it.
Eonic gets chunked by the ultimate. It comes in over the top. Zapman uses the dash to get in range, but can't quite find it. Eonic has sprint, and that gets him out of there, but they're not done. Sanford Soccer locks down Lasbra, and the big-time dunk coming in from the ultimate. Sanford Soccer finds an easy kill.
Oh, what a clean pick onto the Agni. Lasbra now struggling. Eonic just narrowly avoiding certain death there. I like what Zap was trying to do. He uses ultimate to Rising Jaguar. The boosted movement speed from that ultimate allows your Rising Jaguar to cover more distance because it based off your movement speed. And then the range increase. The ultimate just faded as Zap threw out a bola trying to last hit Eonic, so he didn't have the range that he was hoping for.
So it couldn't quite lock him down. Fire Giant started, and just as quickly it fades. No way they'll be able to bring that down just yet, even with the Vulcan. Instead, they'll group up here in mid. They've already taken this tier 1 tower, Tully, so that's no longer an option. Remember, we talked about how this King Arthur early on to move over towards Ducky didn't have any magic defense and how he might be a target. Well, that window's starting to close. He's working on some magic defense now, and he won't stay vulnerable.
Definitely not. Probably going to be the Genji's guard just to get extra cooldown reduction. Already sitting at about 20% between the Gladiator Shield and that Blackthorn's Hammer. You get a huge boosted amount of MP5 with the Genji's guard. So this is your kind of cookie cutter style build for any ability-based warriors.
One of the better magic defense options out there right now for Ducky, and he'll certainly complete it, and now he's feeling good. So really the question for me becomes then, or the thread in this game, is yes, they have this King Arthur that's level 16. He's way out in front. But is that enough to make up for the fact that Eonic and Lasbra Toli have really struggled? I mean, level 10, level 13, each multiple levels down behind the direct opponent.
I don't think it's enough because the firepower that SK Gaming are bringing to Trifecta is too hot to handle. As hot as Lasbra is playing the Agni, I think Paul on the Vulcan is bringing the magma, right? So fight fire with fire, quite literally in the sense. So the range also from Paul makes it tricky for Lasbra because you got Sanford Soccer with the blink, Belair with the blink, Neirumah with the blink, Darkest of Nights from Zapman. Like, how are you supposed to survive if you're Lasbra, especially when your support is an Achilles that wants to do the same job that these other SK frontliners are doing by blinking in himself?
They're doing it even better. Knockup works in favor of Wowy. He repositions and Neil takes a bit of poke. Weaken is up in the air, but is immune to the knockup as Neil doesn't get hit, and that's a big ultimate that's going to come through from Paul, but that does make it 1-for-1 support for support, but Wowy is way too low. Lasbra falls first. Wowy joins him. That sets up a double for Sam for Soccer. Ducky goes into the air. That buys time for Weaken to get Zapman, but Belair takes it personally. He takes him down, finds a double of his own at the deicide, and SK can come right back to the Oni.
And this is the difference where Trifecta found kills on the right side of the map versus SK finding kills on the left side of the map. After this 18-minute deicide, getting themselves the Oni Fury, enabling huge pushing power now with the next minion wave that spawns, doing about an extra 100% damage on all fronts. You can't leave any lane uncontested now.
And I'm a simple guy, totally. When I see Vulcan ult hit 2, I think that team's going to win the fight. So as
Same.
long as Paul is doing things like that, SK Gaming are in a good spot anyway. Add in that he went for this Breastplate of Valor, and that neutralizes, for me, one of the only advantages for Trifecta, which is that their solo jungles ahead, they're both going to do less damage to Vulcan now that he's got it.
That's right. Weaken was able to get his Aegis off, but Eonic was mid-animation of the Fatal Strike, so he couldn't really cover the distance to disengage that time around, and that's what you really need if you're SK Gaming, is allow Paul and Zapman to do these late game things. Not many kills on either one of them, but they're certainly bringing the assists because the early game didn't favor SK Gaming the same way that it did in that first game.
That's right. They still are ahead, but not by nearly as much. And Zapman is still trying to make that lead work for him. He's gone with the Rage, though not quite as early. He didn't put in the third slot, grabbed Executioner this time, but he's still going to be able to get some easy assists. His team is still the one dictating the pace, so we'll still be able to get plenty of crit value. He just got to worry about if Ducky and Eonic start looking to reflect it.
Okay, I was kind of curious to see if the Rage was going to be picked up in this game as well, because it's not a dominating game from SK compared to the last one, but it seems that Zap heavily prefers this item, at least on Xbalanque.
The Battle of Red Buff Hill. A tale as old as time, Toli. It happens yet again. This time it favors SK Gaming, and they send Trifecta back. An attempt from the stun from Eonic finds nothing, and that means SK can again group up around the Tier 2 tower in mid. They've got Sanford Soccer flanking, but plenty of wards should spot him out.
I'm all for the Battle of the Red Hill because, honestly, Seasons 1 through 4 was the Battle of the Speed Buff Mountain.
That's right,
honestly.
Yeah. A bloody battle that lasted many years. And really, who came out the victor? It was just the audience at home, as the rest of Trifecta tried to defend. SK Gaming finding it harder than I think to make their way in, and Ducky wants to start the fight off on his own terms. Ultimate from Paul does clip 2, and now it means Wowy's low, and Belair takes Ducky down. He pays for aggressing too far forward. We can find a knock-up onto multiple, but there's no immediate follow-up. In fact, he'll pay for it with his life. A double now for the Batman himself. Tier 2 tower under siege as Zapman keeps the autos going.
Nothing that Trifecta can do except watch as their Tier 2 in the mid absolutely crumbles to the ground. Great ultimate again out of Paul, clipping Ducky out of position too far forward with the rest of his team disengaging. This left the King Arthur isolated and all alone in the cold, only to be heated up by a nice, juicy Vulcan ultimate.
I wonder if after fights like that, everyone's like, all right, Fire Giant's free for us. Let's go back and get it. And then you hear just Belair in the back. I am the Knight. I am the Batman. And I get double kills. And that's what he got here, Toli. 2 free ones for the Camazotz. He turned that fight around for SK. Fire Giant around all 5 members of them. They can go wherever it is they want.
It's not just the fact that it's Camazotz in this game. It's the fact that there's a Xbalanque to really make it thematic.
That's right.
For Camazotz to be that assassin in the backline.
He's scary. The vigilante, truly, is Belair so far. 5-2-2. And he can go wherever he wants. Evoke fear into the hearts of these criminals. Poor Trifecta. But they still have plenty of time. Only down 10k. That's a lot. I don't mean only, but they still have a chance to try and slow him down.
I mean, honestly, between games 1 and 2, for SK Gaming, Belair is not the hero that they deserve.
He's the one they need.
Exactly.
That's right. He is the hero that they need. They're going to bide their time, though. They're not ready to push in just yet. They've already gotten the Tier 2 in mid, so the mid Phoenix is exposed, but I imagine they'll want to go grab that free gold in these side lanes while they can. And they have plenty of good tools to make it work. Zapman's ultimate shuts off the lights, makes it so hard for Trifecta to coordinate their defenses, even with the range stun of Agni, which is normally so good on sieges. SK Gaming can essentially neutralize it.
They could. They certainly can. And the way they've been playing thus far with their blinks and also Paul hitting the ultimates on the front line, like that Genji's guard is not enough to deal with Paul's damage. And now, because Zapman has 4 stacks on Rage, even a Wind Demon, he's building what I think is going to be a Murgari mail to slow some of that damage down ever so slightly. But then that's just going to allow Paul to keep doing Vulcan things anyway.
That's right. It won't be enough defense when he goes up against those magic damage dealers. As they've got to find some kind of way to get Lasbra relevant in these games. He's down 4 levels, only just ticked over to 17, so now 3 to Paul. It's just too large of a disparity for them to make up, and I think it really comes down to just losing almost every red buff this game. That it's just going to put you behind.
It is, and the 4-man rotations onto that soul lane to kill out Sanford Soccer is what allowed Paul to get that early lead because he was solo farming that mid lane the whole time.
Weekend's gone up in the air. They make Zapman the target. He has beads, but doesn't use them. Able to get out with the Rising Jaguar. Aegis finally comes out to avoid the bombs, and that's Sanford Soccer's cue to go back in. Zapman hits the light switch. That means Trifecta have to fall back, but Neirumah's not done yet. He flops in and hits 2, and the Agni bombs are there for the lockdown.
It's just a bait because on the right side of the map, SK Gaming get a free Phoenix uncontested, and you know what, Finch? They're not done. They're gonna go for the end. Sanford Soccer and Zap is gonna prevent everyone from backing.
Zapman gets the kill, and they're gonna trust Belair and Paul to have enough damage. They even couldn't back. Lasbra had to come back the old-fashioned way. They dropped the ultimate over the top. Titan is incredibly low, and SK Gaming with the okie doke. They're able to clean up the win.
Man, mind games out of SK Gaming. I don't know who made that call. I'm gonna say it's Zapman, but man. Truly respect for whoever did, and that's what makes SK Gaming such a scary team to play against. Despite losing last week 0-3 to Pittsburgh Knights, they look like they could have won almost any one of those games, and now truly dominating Trifecta in week number 2.
And we all said it, right? It was a 3-0 loss, but it looked way closer than just 3-0
Sure.
was gonna give that information away if you didn't watch those matches. And now I think you're getting an idea of why. Toli, you talked to me before this, and you said, I think this SK team's really strong. Taco talked to me. She said, I think they're top 4. And I said, Taco, then they got to come out in 3-0 here. You got to win sets like this if you're going to be a top team up there with some of those best, and right now SK are showing it.
You got to be able to do a wide variety of strategies as well.
Yeah.
Paul on the Jean Kui threw me for a loop, honestly. I love it. I love the adaptations that they made. I love the fact that Neirumah's starting to play this Bacchus as well. I'm kind of curious to see if Terra's going to come out in this set, though.
Well, that's twice now that King Arthur has fallen. The crown lies discarded on the floor. Can they pick it back up and make this work? We'll have to find out in the next game. Aggro and Taco, what do you guys think?
Finch, that was an appropriately edgy throw for a Fall Out Boy fan. I just thought I'd mention that. SK Gaming end up with another easy victory here in Game 2, though Trifecta put up a little bit more of a fight. It's just that one fight underneath the Tier 2 and mid went so well for SK, it blew the game wide open.
And that was the problem as well, is that Trifecta didn't really have any room, again, for recovery after the fact, because it was just so clearly into SK's favor as soon as they come out on top from that fight. And even at the very end, I mean, Trifecta just seemed like they were constantly being distracted from where the real action was at.
Exactly. The end where the fight is going on the left side, but the real fight is going on in your Titan. Trifecta obviously ended up on the bottom end of that one. This fight in particular also set SK Gaming up for great success later on. And what do you know, it was Sam for Soccer and Belair who did a lot of work. Paul looked great on this Vulcan. I will say that Ducky looked a lot better in this game on the King Arthur than he did in Game 1, but still, I don't think this Achilles pick worked out particularly well for Eonic. He was very low on the player damage charts on a pick that needs to be doing at least a little bit of player damage. And then Wowy on this Jingwei, again, was a complete non-factor in the game.
I think it's just Wowy having a tough time building up the relevance needed for Jingwei. A lot of times you're not really looking to box on her until you got those Devo gloves or the Ninja Tab by. You want at least 2 or 3 items online first for Jingwei before you start looking to be a little bit more aggressive here. But Zapman, I think, just had the advantage in a lot of those fights, because the Darkest Night, I think, definitely limited not only all of Trifecta's vision, but Wowy has to rely on his front line to give him a front line so he can actually cast and look for autos. And I just don't think that Trifecta were really able to ever prioritize Peel or putting their Hunter into a position where he could maybe fight back into this SK roster. It just felt like the burst damage was just too overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that the front line hasn't done enough to keep Lasbra and Wowy safe enough where they can put out relevant damage so far in this game. So game 1 was a clean win for SK. Game 2, Trifecta going with fairly similar picks and bans, but end up losing still in pretty similar fashion. In my mind, in Game 3, now's the time where you're going to really change it up, right? I mean, maybe it's time for Trifecta to ban King Arthur and just pick something else, because they can't keep going in this same direction, right?
I don't think it's worthwhile for Trifecta at this point. SK have already proven that, at least when it comes to Trifecta, they know how to handle this King Arthur situation, and that if it's not viewed as a threat from SK, well, you're also handicapping yourself by basically forcing Ducky into having to take the King Arthur, as opposed to something like the Osiris, like the Bellona, that he can still be aggressive with, but not necessarily let the game escalate so rapidly. That's just been the biggest recurring factor here in both of these games that we've watched so far. It's usually not just the one or two team fights that go heavy-handed in SK's favor. It's everything else surrounding that. I mean, the laning phases, they're SK. The team fights, the objective fights, they're all SK.